my prior job, before going to Weber Shandwick, which is a public relations company that has a large section that helps agricultural clients, both producer side and agribusinesses. My job before that was with the state vet's office in Minnesota. So I started off in media, in television when I graduated from college, went to the Department of Agriculture in Minnesota, and then very quickly decided that I've always been a livestock girl, grew up on a farm, still live on a farm, just finished lambing actually. I heard from my husband this morning, the last lamb dropped overnight. And then went on to the state vet's office. I was there for 12 years as the communications director. And so this, being amongst veterinarians, being amongst animal health, the livestock industries is like coming home to me. It's really where I feel comfortable. So to be asked to do this was just incredibly exciting for me. And specifically talking about social media and the EDCC and trying to think about how the two navigate together. As Josie talked about, there's been an extensive amount of work already done trying to create and build what this EDCC is going to do. But now the work isn't just on this task force. The work is on all of us. It's on the industry and you as leaders within the industry to really try to take it to that next step. Once it's there and it's active, it is only going to be used if we are the ones that direct people to go there. We need all of our partners to help kind of supply that really strong excitement and energy and talk about how this is the go-to location for information about multiple state disease situations or any disease situation for all those different kinds of states. So social media really is one of those things that can help us. I know we often talk about the opposite of that, how social media isn't all that helpful, but it really can be helpful. What we need to do is engage and be there on social media so that those stories that are going on are stories that we're a part of. We need to share our side of that story. What are we doing as regulatory veterinarians? What are we doing at our practice? How are we responding? And getting out accurate information so that we're part of that conversation. So, as we often recall and talk about, we look back over different kind of case studies to see what happened and what can we learn from it, because we want to try to take it and be better and better and better every time a situation comes. As you guys very easily recall, back in 2011, after the National Cutting Horse Association's event, we had a horse test positive. Very quickly, Colorado put out a news release with the help of USDA and got information out. But still, that story went completely viral. Rumors were spreading. We had horse shows and different things canceled. So really, there was a strong impact. I spoke with Dr. Keith Rohr and I spoke with Christy Lightcap, their communications director. And she said that the number of website hits for that agency, for the Colorado Department of Ag, is usually around 14,000 a month. During this situation, it bounced up to just under 50,000. So you could just see the desire that people have to get information. They want to know what's happening. They want to know that something is happening. And so we really need to be able to give that information to them. So that was on the website. So we're talking social media as we move through here too. So these are just some of the basic facts that came out of this situation. We really saw a number of states impacted. I remember being a part of one of the trace out states, and we had a couple of horses that were involved in Minnesota. Lots of premises, number of confirmed cases. But it wasn't just the horse owners being affected. Next slide. We had actually a number of our horse shows impacted. So not only are we talking about the economic impact to our states, our horse owners, but we're talking about the impact of not having these large horse shows as well. So the impact to those communities was great as well. So when we look at, that's 2011. Now, just so happens that about a week ago in Minnesota, there was an announcement of EHV. This is the non-neurological type, but still a good thing for us to take a look at to see how it's going on social media. We know in 2011, things went crazy. We didn't get ahead of that storm and it kind of went off without us. Let's just take a quick look at what's happening in 2014. So in Minnesota and Wisconsin, there isn't a real large social media presence by our regulatory veterinarians. So things are happening without them being part of that conversation on Facebook and on Twitter. The University of Minnesota Equine Center has become a source, Minnesota Association of Equine Practitioners, and then a lot of the large equine vet clinics have really stepped up to put information out there. Interestingly enough, we're seeing the most people going back to their vet clinics with this situation. So if there's a large equine center, you have a vet there, you're turning there instantly for information. So basically what happened is, as you can see, the equine center put out little blurbs here and there that the state would approve. Here's what's happening. Not as often as we probably would like, but they were still putting it out there, which is good because the state wasn't providing that. But, so here is one of our large veterinary clinics in the state of Minnesota. Great clinic. They do amazing work. Put information out there about the situation. Interestingly enough, it's been liked by 76 people, but shared 755 times. And this was fairly early on. They hadn't posted, this had been, I think, up for maybe about 5 hours. So I'm sure by now it's extensively bigger on the shares. But what happened was they put this information out, which this information was not accurate. It wasn't confirmed by the state vet's office. And things went crazy down here. So Minnesota has a law that actually keeps horse owners and all livestock owners information private. It's a law that's been passed through the state legislature. So they can't actually provide that information to people. They will confirm it if the call comes in. Thank you very much. They will confirm it, but they can't actually put it out there because it would be against the law. So here we've got a lawyer, an attorney saying, you need to be giving this information out. This is a public health threat. Other people are saying, why are these animals being quarantined? No animals were quarantined. It's not a public health threat. And it literally goes on and on as you scroll through your Facebook page, all of the misinformation that's in there. I don't know that they understood how quickly that was going to happen because they haven't joined back in the conversation at all. They're just letting it go on. So on Twitter, that was on Facebook, this is on Twitter, you can see that the AVMA vets have put out some information, and you can see that this is a place where people are asking questions. She simply wants to know, it looks like there's something going on at the barn next door. Are my horses safe? So she's looking for some basic disease information. She wants an update about the situation. But it's a place where people are asking questions. And unfortunately, no answers are being given. So there's numerous, this is just one of probably about 1,000 that we saw. But nobody's out there answering those questions right now. So as you heard Josie say, and as you just saw, there is a need, a great need for an equine disease communication center. So if we want to talk about how we're going to get people there, it's really going to go back to social media. Social media is one place where we can really help to drive people to this resource. So we could simply say, if you're looking for the latest on this situation, check out the EDCC at this web address. There's lots of simple responses that we can get to simply drive people there without providing a lot of information. But the fact is that social media has revolutionized the way that we communicate. It's very different if you think about how much it's changed just in the last 10 years. Half of people get their news from online sources. So rather than picking up that newspaper like we're used to with a cup of coffee, sitting down reading it, I saw Tom doing that this morning, half of people don't even do that anymore. They just go straight to online, their iPad, their iPod, their smart devices, start looking at it. It's okay to be old school. It's okay. but it certainly is changing when you think about it. And interestingly enough, 20% of people as well are just getting it from Twitter or just getting it from Facebook. So they might follow the local newspaper, but they're getting updates via social media rather than going anywhere else. We all know this. I thought these facts were kind of astounding. That every second, this is what you see posted. 24 minutes of video. 580 Facebook statuses are being updated. That's how quickly this piece is moving. And so in order to get ahead of it, it can be very challenging. So when I grew up in a small town, southwestern Minnesota, the biggest worry we had was the coffee shop, where people were sitting around a table, talking, sharing news. You didn't want to be part of that content and that information. But it was likely only 10 people, maybe 12 people that would start that rumor mill. That has literally gone online. We have that same kind of atmosphere where people want to share, be the first to tell the story, but it's happening on social media. And so the amount of people that can be impacted or affected by that is tremendously greater. So we really want to try to get ahead of it. And what does that mean? Well, in order to get ahead of it, we actually have to start before the crisis even happens. And that means we start with you. So the big piece is that we need all of you as the equine leaders to engage and get on social media and to start sharing. If you have an organization, have the organization start to get more active on social media. Ultimately, what we want to do is be proactive. We are going to have to be reactive as well, but we need to start now and get people engaged, get followers. The biggest one is industry organizations. We've already got a lot of our organizations out there that have great Facebook presences, Twitter. We need to get those folks to start to follow the EDCC. So it might be through some emails that we could send out to them where they can sign up. It might just be simply getting them to understand where the website is and what information they could get from them. The next one is government. Government is an important piece, as you talked about, or as Josie talked about. It's kind of juggling a whole bunch of balls, trying to make sure that you're getting the latest information, you're getting approvals when you need to, and in every case, every single one of those state animal health officials is going to handle a situation differently. So it is going to become situation, conversation, how are you handling this, how does this happen, and try and work together to get the information out. It's vital that we have them because we have to have them in order to really make sure that we come across as reputable. We want them to be able to understand that we're there to help them, especially with those smaller states. I spoke to Dr. Bill Hartman, the state veterinarian from Minnesota last night. We were talking about this, and he even made the comment of how tremendously useful it would be, especially in situations where they don't put out specific responses about diseases. The EDCC could be that location. You could do a general interview and say, hey, you know, there's a bunch of information available on the Equine Disease Communication Center. You should check it out. So we want them to be involved, and we want to be able to share information back and forth and be trusted sources that way. Third-party experts. I'm thrilled to the gills to hear people talking about how important it is to have experts. We want those academia, third-party experts, researchers to be involved in all of this so that they can provide more layers to the story. They can back up and substantiate what we're talking about. We want to make sure that we're always talking with that one voice, but it's very important that they be involved because these are the people that are considered by the media and others to be unbiased. They're research-minded. They're scientific. They're not in the pockets of any specific company or any specific organization. These folks are neutral, and if they're saying that this indeed is the case, then a lot of times people will believe them. Horse owners. As we talked about with industry organizations, we're going to really try to drive and get communications out to our horse owners through this organization. But we have to make sure that we don't forget them. They're the big reason why we're all here today. People love horses. They want them to be part of their families, part of their lives. So we need to get them information as quickly as we can. And we want them to learn as well that the EDCC is where to go for that information. I think there's another one. There we go. Our equine veterinarians. This is absolutely a vital source. As you saw in the Minnesota situation, when the state wasn't putting out or the federal government wasn't putting out information, people went right to their veterinarian. In some cases, we can simply link up with those veterinarians and ask them to start using us as a resource. That EDCC can be a resource to them so they don't have to sit there and post things. They can simply say, a new update has been given on the EDCC, check it out. And they can be there, part of it. And as in lots of conversations I've had over the course of the last day, equine practitioners are some of the most aggressive and most active on Facebook. This is a great place. We can use their following to help us share the information we need to share. And lastly, media. We know they're going to come when it's a crisis. That certainly is going to happen. But we can also use the media and our conversations that we just generally have with them to start building up the idea that there's this organization. Here's what they do. You can call and report a situation to the call center. You can check out the website for disease information. We've got access to experts 24/7. All of those are great pieces. The media are always looking for good sources of information, accurate, good sources of information, which is exactly what we're going to find here with EDCC. So, now, my mouth is dry. I need to ask you guys some questions. So as we look at social media, what are you guys using? What things are you on right now? Facebook and Twitter, very common ones, yes. Anybody else? Oh, come on. It's like church. Get people talking.
YouTube, Instagram. I'm not using those. I'm still with that.
Those are good though. You know the names. That's impressive. No, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So Instagram is kind of a photo sharing site. Can be very useful when we're talking about wanting to push out symptoms of a disease or something. Watch for signs of this. There are some of those kind of ways we could use that. Anybody else? You're shaking your head. I'm going to ask. You have to know a couple.
Pinterest is a big one. I have a lot.
Pinterest is a really great one. A lot of our agricultural groups that do ag in the classroom have used Pinterest as a really great location to show different ways of doing activities and stuff. Yep. Now I know actually because I had some folks at my office do a scan, what we call a social media scan, for anybody that was on the committee, the equine committee. We took a look at all of you to see where you're at, where you're active, and what you're up to. Well, you're not overly active. That's one thing we found. The second thing we found, though, is that there are about 4 or 5 people that are incredibly active, that actually have quite a following. A lot of you are on LinkedIn. Go to jump to the next one for me, Car. LinkedIn is one that's actually used quite extensively by veterinarians. And if you aren't familiar with it, LinkedIn is more of a professional site. It allows you to basically see people's resumes and what experiences they have. You can join some closed groups, so you can share information back and forth. And in addition, you can also have some like postings about interesting information or articles or things like that. You can click through if you want to. So the other one that you guys were typically on was Facebook. You can click it 4 more times for me, pop them through. So Facebook was one, and that's very common. Facebook is one that we oftentimes go to when we're talking about just friends and family. When we want to share pictures, we want to see what people are up to, we want to kind of keep track of them, or as oftentimes we call Facebook stalking. You want to see what people are doing and just kind of check it out. So interestingly enough, in the whole world that we're in right now, the 2 things that I would suggest that we consider moving towards, or at least getting you guys active on, first and foremost, if you haven't joined LinkedIn, this is the easiest place to start. This is social media, very simplified, not complex, and a little less involved. You don't have to be doing it constantly, but it is a good place to network and to meet up with people and share information. The next one is Facebook. Facebook is a great place, again, to share information, provide updates, and to build your clout, so to speak, to build your following. One of the really nice things about both of these is you can establish a closed group. So as the equine disease, or equine communications disease center starts to really ramp up and become bigger, it's going to start with a call center and then a website. My next suggestion is that the EDCC jump on social media. Get involved, be part of that conversation. And this is the place where I would start. So this is a great way for you guys to also start, in that it's something that a lot of your friends and family are already using. It's a fairly easy tool to do. If you have any questions about how to do any of these, I have some resources I can email you. We've got all of your emails, so if you're interested, just stop up or let me know and I'll send them to everybody. But there's some great tutorials out there, even on YouTube and things like that can walk you through step by step how to do it and then how to engage with that platform. Twitter is the next one that I would suggest. Twitter is one that, even for me personally, becomes a little overwhelming. It moves fast. It moves incredibly fast. People are updating all the time. It's very short little bits. It's just an incredibly fast-paced environment. But it's an important place to be, because this is where a lot of those 50%, if you remember, 50% of Americans getting their news online and 20% from social media, this is where they're getting it from. A lot of my friends don't ever watch the news, don't ever read the paper, but they subscribe to the local paper, Twitter updates, and they just pop through constantly. So that's an important one for us to consider as we look at building the EDCC on social media. Facebook and Twitter would be good ones to consider. So on to the next one. So as we're talking about all of you and what we need to do, is we really need for you guys to get engaged, to jump on these platforms, start using them. If your office isn't involved with it, start using it. Think about how you can incorporate it into what you do. So for example, I chatted a little bit with Minnesota, and they were willing to let me offer this up. So one of the things they've been talking about is getting on social media, but it hasn't happened. Even when I was there as a communications director, we didn't want to jump in until we knew we could do it well. They're to that point now. They're ready to jump in, and so they'll be able to engage in these conversations. So if you're from the regulatory side, from the state animal health office, and you're not on Facebook or Twitter, start considering it. Think about it. How does this work? How would you put this information out? And it's not on the responsibility of the state vet to do it. You can find a person within your office that can help to do that stuff as well. But personally, take it on to give it a try. Give it a shot and try to put information out there. Yeah.
I just have a great example. Twitter. My brother is in South Africa, and several months ago, he emailed me in the middle of the night because there was that horse trailer accident on I-95 in South Carolina that I found out, until the next day. Somehow in the middle of the night, tweeted, he made the solid call force in South Carolina. He emailed me. It's just amazing how fast that information can travel.
And the route that information took to get you.
That's also fascinating.
Yeah, that's just it. It's when I was a television reporter, I would go to a news conference or some sort of event, and I would shoot the video. I'd have my little notebook where I'd take my notes. We'd go back to the newsroom. We'd write the story. We'd edit the story, and 5 or 6 hours later, you'd have it on the 6 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock, even later, the 10 o'clock news. Well, now when you have a news conference, you guys probably have experienced this. There are reporters tweeting right there, live tweeting. The instant you say it, it's tweeted. You got pictures on Instagram, pictures going onto Facebook, because they're taking them right there. They're shooting videos and posting. It is just instantaneous now. I mean, there's really not. Reporters are reporting all the time, just like all of us. I mean, there could be one of you sitting there right now tweeting what I'm talking about, pushing it out there as well. So it's just something that we have to be used to. It's a change in our entire environment. So learning about the platforms. As I said, if you're not used to Facebook or you're not used to Twitter or LinkedIn, let me know. Call me. Drop me an email. I'd be happy to get you some resources that will walk you through step by step so you don't have to feel scared of them anymore. Then practice. Use them personally for a little while just to get the hang of it, to see what it's like. If you don't practice, we all know that we end up failing in the long run. So it's very important at least to become familiar with the platform. If you have somebody else that's going to be doing the tweeting or putting things on Facebook for you, you don't have to become a robust user or a robust understander, but you need to at least understand the importance of why that information needs to get out there and understand what we can and can't put out there. And then, of course, be ready. As we talk about, practice makes perfect, so it's always important to try and practice to see how things are going. So, as I mentioned with Minnesota, they waited and have waited a while to try to figure out when exactly is the right time for them to jump on Facebook. Well, now's the right time. We have to figure out how to make it happen because everyone is on social media. And that conversation right now, whether you're talking about a cattle disease, a sheep disease, swine disease, or a horse disease, it's that conversation about these things is going on without us. If we don't jump into it to provide the right information, the rumor mill is just going to continue to go on. So if we're going to be on social media, we have to be social. We need to be present, we need to be timely, we need to be there. And one of the best examples that I can share of being in the moment is one of those situations, not in agriculture, but is the literally best example in this entire situation, or in this entire realm. Do you remember at the Super Bowl last year, so year 4, when it went dark for like 35 minutes or something like that? On social media, Oreo had their folks there on social media during the Super Bowl, and they're doing some general tweets. They're putting some things out on Facebook about the plays or whatever, and then within minutes, they turned this around after it went dark. So what it says, if you can't see it, is you can still dunk in the dark. So within minutes of the whole stadium going black, they had this posted. What did that tell us? What did we know about this? If they're posting it right then, what do we know? Holler it out. What do you think? They were at the ready. Yeah. Somebody had approval to be able to act at a moment's notice. And they were right there with us. So here is a brand, the Oreo cookie, but they were in that moment with us. They were watching the Super Bowl with us. They're sitting right alongside us via Facebook and Twitter. This was considered the best ad out of that entire Super Bowl. And it didn't cost them a dime. Not the millions upon millions of dollars during those Super Bowl ads. This was the one that people have touted as the best ad of the entire Super Bowl. I go back to this one too, just to bring up the be there, be timely, be part of it, be engaged. If we're out on social media, we're seeing this kind of thing happen, we have a responsibility to alert the EDCC. We need to talk, we need to provide information. We need to say, it's so great to see so many of you interested in this situation. Check out the EDCC for the latest. If you'd like to know what this disease is all about, check out the EDCC. We can post non-controversial posts to Facebook or Twitter without having to get into all of this argument, but just simply trying to direct people to the right place. We want to share our story. For many of us, growing up in a small town or growing up in the day when social media wasn't how we lived, sharing my story sometimes isn't overly comfortable. But we have to try to break out of that a little bit and share the story of who we are. For example, when I used to do an interview with the state vet's office, a lot of times I was able to use empathy if we were dealing with a quarantine or having to put down animals, because I had been through the situation. I'm a farmer, I have sheep, and my dad's flock was quarantined for scraping. So we ended up being a flock that was involved in that investigation, quarantined, and had a couple sheep put down because they were susceptible. So I've been there. I can use that empathy to say, this is a really difficult situation for these farmers, and I feel for them. But we need to do these things in order to make sure the disease doesn't spread, or to make sure that our livestock industry remains strong. That empathy piece is so important to what we do, but it really allows us to share a story with somebody and to really engage people at a higher level. So when you're thinking about what kind of things, whether you're talking about personally or professionally within your organization, or just within your role as an expert within the horse industry, how do you craft a response? These are just a few things to think about when you're putting things out there. Identify your role and how it can help in a crisis. So think about, what's your unique contribution to the industry? Are you a state vet? Are you somebody that works at the USDA? Are you an equine expert? Do you have lots of roles on very important, very big boards, Tom? I mean, we have all these different responsibilities, these different pieces that we have as part of this equine community. What is your personal role? What do you have that you can contribute? And then that will help you to frame up how you're going to present the information. If you're a researcher, you're going to probably link back to some research. If you are an expert in, if you do help to organize horse shows, you've got an expertise when it comes to exhibitions. So a couple of basic things. Never overreact and never get angry. If you're dealing with a heated situation, you do not want to get angry. You want to keep calm and just simply provide the facts. You can use a little empathy, but state the facts at that point. If you can, if it's not a heated situation and you can use personality, that's okay. It's okay to have personality. As we saw, Oreo, the brand, had a personality when they were trying to put out their information. And it's okay in a non-crisis type situation to have a little bit of personality in what you post. It's important as well, if you're posting from an organization, it's really important to let people know that you want their feedback, you want their questions. Thank you for asking so many great questions. Here's some responses to what we're hearing. It just simply lets people know that you desire them to participate, you want them to be a part of it, and they're more likely to ask the questions that are sitting on their mind or the rumors that they're hearing. So avoid stock responses. As you can imagine, you can go to the next one, Carl. Just simply providing the same response over and over and over again is not going to work. A lot of times in government, we have a tendency to lean towards, this is our statement. Well, we want to be more human than that, especially on social media. That's one of the biggest pieces, is really coming across as human. This situation was a progressive, there was a gentleman and a gentleman that had passed away as a result of an accident. Progressive denied him and did not cover this entire accident. And so, long story short, the family had taken to social media and had said, this is completely awful that they are not willing to cover our family. lost our brother this way. So what they continue to do over and over and over is every single time somebody posted something, they responded the exact same way. This is tragic, and our sympathies go out to the family for the pain that they have. This is tragic. Our sympathies go out to that's not human. People want to know that you care, but they don't want you to give some sort of stock, repetitive response. So as we talked about empathy, whether you're talking just in general to the media, not even on social media, you're just talking to the media in a crisis, work in empathy. It's really important. Apologize when something's your fault, but do keep in mind that there could be some legal implications. So if it's a huge situation, you might want to talk to legal counsel or talk to, at least talk to the lawyers within your offices just to make sure that it's an all right thing for you to do. Posting, as we talked about, posting public personalized messages is always the way to go. But if you can't put out a response as quickly as you would like, you can use a holding statement. And Josie had kind of that same holding statement idea when in between the time where something is announced, or not even announced, but rumors are starting to fly, and we've got the time where we actually have disease confirmation, that's a really difficult time. We don't know for sure if it's this disease, but people are already talking about it. So what can we tell people? What can we say that we're looking into it? That we are currently working with the location and we're doing some tests. We will put out information as soon as we know it. Have we quarantined that farm just in case so that we know the disease has not moved? What can we say? What can we provide? It will certainly be a conversation between state animal health officials and the EDCC, but it's an important thing for all of us to think about in that kind of, especially that middle zone before we have confirmation of disease. What can we say? So when we talk about the response, Carl, do you want to hit it one more time for me? It is good to know in a crisis situation, how long do you have before you have to respond to someone? And what they say is for 32% of people are looking at about a half hour, and 42%, if you want to hit it one more time, 42% expect a response within an hour. So this is really important for us to know because, number one, oftentimes we don't move very quickly in a crisis. We're moving and running around fast, but we're not pushing information out all that quickly. So this can be a challenge. So what I would say is within 30 minutes to an hour, you want to try to respond to a concern. You want to get out that information. And it's important to also think about what kind of information you can put out at that point. Who do you need to let know that information? So if you're working with other groups, so if you're working with the Colorado Department of Agriculture, they're going to be putting that information out. Who do they also need to tell? What other horse groups do they want to alert to this so that they can also share the same message on their Facebook pages? So sometimes there's some communicating with those other groups that's going to happen just before you release that information to the public. You might make a phone call and say, hey, Quarter Horse Association, we're going to be putting this out in a little bit. I'm hopeful that you'll be willing to help share it. It should be up in a few minutes. So that way that information gets shared more broadly. So we want to make sure that we work together. You can click through, I think it's set to unveil. But so when we're talking about developing a plan that's actually going to make sure that we're successful, there's a number of different things. The first thing is we want to build that following. So our proactive type approach. We want to work on building the following, and that for the EDCC is going to come from all of those associations. It's going to come from the state animal health officials following us, the federal government following us, all of the equine veterinary clinics, the media. We're going to work to build up that following. That's the first piece, because once that's in place, the moment the EDCC shares information, it goes viral. And that's the information we want to go viral. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but also proactively, you can think about the most likely crisis situations you're going to deal with and develop some responses to those. A lot of the questions that we get are going to be the same from disease to disease. But if we're talking, EHV, we know what the likely questions are that we're going to get asked. So let's develop some responses to those so that they're ready to go in the event that something happens. A very, very, very important piece that we don't do nearly enough in our agricultural industries is monitoring the conversations. That will be part of what the EDCC and others will be doing, but it's on all of us. If we see something happening online on social media, we need to flag it and let people know. If you hear about it, we need to say something. But highly likely that call center is going to be a location where we're going to find out, I heard this on social media, what's up? So then we can start to even do more monitoring. But monitoring is just a simple act of looking around on social media to see what the conversations are. It doesn't have to be an expensive process. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So it's kind of a maintaining piece. But when crisis happens, we have to do more monitoring. It's got to be elevated to a higher level. So again, as I mentioned, coordinating with stakeholders is vital. If you want to make sure that they're saying the same thing that you're saying, you have to talk with one voice. And the only way that's going to happen is if you actually talk. So oftentimes before, when I was in the state vet's office, we would have a conference call about an hour before the news release went out. And we would say, ag organizations, here's what we're talking about today. We've got this situation, this is what's happening, here's our response, here's what we're putting out, and we would give them the chance to ask a few questions. And then we put out the news release, or posted it and got it out. Going back to having being able to contact people at any point in time, there are a number of states that do have a 24/7 kind of duty officer way of reaching out to those state veterinarians. But in regards to the EDCC, having an emergency contact list, or for your organizations as well, it is vital. You need to have every phone number that everybody has, all their contact information, because you may need it at some point. So I wanted to throw this in here as you guys contemplate the future of the EDCC and where it should go. I truly do believe that it should be on social media. And Josie and I have talked about this, and she also agrees that that's the direction that needs to be contemplated. But one of the things, the big first steps for when the EDCC goes social on Facebook or Twitter is to think about a few of these pieces. We really need to lay some ground rules, basically, is what this is. They're community rules. This is what we're going to allow. This is what we're not going to allow. So we talk about what things that can be posted and the information that others can put on there. We need to think about what kind of legal or moral restrictions we have, promotion or solicitation. How are we going to handle that if somebody wants to sell horse stuff on our page, or somebody wants to actually sell their horse and is posting that kind of stuff? What are we going to do about that? Profanity or bad posts, are we going to pull them? Are we going to respond to them? How are we going to handle that? Criminal activity, fairly simple. You're going to report it and take it off. But just simply wanted to put it up there so you thought about it. Inappropriate content. You also want to think about the staff rules within the EDCC or your committees and the confidentiality piece, because there is a lot of information that we have that we're going to have at our disposal that they're going to share, the state vet office or other regulatory veterinarians might share with us. That isn't something that can be consumed out here. So we want to make sure that we keep that. And response times. Having a really honest conversation around what is a response time that we can do. We want to make sure that we try to keep it to about an hour in a crisis, but in a non-crisis situation, how long is it going to be? So, short end of it, we simply want everybody to start thinking about this EDCC as the go-to location for disease information. And that's up to all of us to really make sure that that driving happens. We need to share it and we need to talk about it. So, let's practice. Should we? You guys are so quiet. Let's practice. So, one of the things that is really great about simple crisis preparedness is just having a discussion or kind of a tabletop talk will really help to work through a few things or some complexities that might happen. So I was just going to mention a couple of things to keep in mind when we're dealing with some of these kind of situations. If you want to jump to the next one for me, Carl. We talked about monitoring. We weren't going to hear about this situation that we just went through, this scenario, unless we were monitoring or unless we got a phone call to the EDCC. So we need to regularly be watching our social media channels. And in order to really know if something's going on, we need to monitor all the time. It doesn't need to be robust monitoring, but we need to watch. And then when something happens, we need to elevate that quickly. And in some cases for the EDCC, it might mean hiring an organization to do that because it's going to be 24/7 watching constantly. But it's something to keep in mind. These are our 3 different levels that we talk about as monitoring. So when I do it for myself, when I'm just talking to a couple of organizations that I'm involved in, one being 4-H and a couple of others, this is what I do. I've just set up some Google alerts to push information to me should something happen, all you do is go on Google. There's a button where you can click to add in some special keywords, and it will send you an email every day with news that relates back to what those keywords were. Simple and free. That's what I like for me personally. Okay, so then when you're talking about wanting to get in that middle tier, this would be a nice system should you have an organization that's not all that often in controversy, doesn't typically get involved in crisis. This is a nice place to be. And if you are there, I can give you specific names if that's something you're interested in. Then you've got this very robust system where you have a super software, if you will, that will allow you to track across social media channels. And again, I've got some great advice if that's something you can pop up afterwards, and I'll give you some names. It is an awesome way to go about it. So one of the things that we talked about was those difficult posts that they put. You know, we're gonna see controversial posts. We're gonna see people that are upset, horse owners that are angry that they weren't told something sooner or they didn't understand something. It's gonna happen. So for the EDCC and for your organizations, it's nice to have kind of a color coding or at least something that helps you analyze those posts to decide what to do. So this is what I use when we're looking through different things for the companies and organizations we work with. No incident just means it's a fine post, let it go. We certainly want them to be sharing and putting comments out there. Ignore. In other words, it's a post that is not exactly something you'd like to see there, but it's not causing any problem. It's not misinformation. We're going to ignore it and let it just simply stay there. Delete. That's when you get into a situation where somebody's using profanity or somebody's being very disrespectful. Very rarely will you hear somebody in public relations or communications say delete a post, because it often will start a problem. People will backlash. They deleted my post, blah, 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 and that will become a bigger issue than simply just letting it stay there and providing a follow-up comment to it. But when there's profanity used or it's disrespectful, we'll oftentimes suggest to delete it. Acknowledge. Perhaps somebody was caught in a situation where, let's just use the scenario we're in, this horse track. Somebody is there, they found out that this is going on, and now they can't take their horse out, and they're upset because they have someplace else that they needed to be, and now they can't get there. They posted it on the EDCC Facebook site. What do we do? Well, we're going to acknowledge that this is a difficult situation to be in. We're sorry that you're caught in this situation. We know it's not ideal. The government is working as quickly as they can to resolve the situation, but it's important that we do it because of this. So just simply acknowledging that they are in a rough spot, and that's unfortunate, but here's why we're doing it. And again, we could also say, if you want to keep up with the latest information on what's going on, check out the EDCC. Resolve directly. If there's something very specific that person has brought up, perhaps they're at the, maybe they posted or they called and they said, I'm here, I'm at the track, I think my horse is sick. Well, we're certainly not going to go on Facebook and say, is your horse running a fever of such and such, showing these type of symptoms, and have this back and forth conversation that says, yes, my horse has a fever, yes, it can't walk, yes, these things. We won't do that. We want to take that conversation offline. So within Facebook, you can do very public posts, and you can have a little private message, kind of like an email system. We would most certainly want to take that kind of a situation private. Or, you know what, here's my phone number, give me a call, let's talk this through. Or contact your local animal health authority at this number to report any symptoms. Escalation required. In other words, things are starting to go bad. I would say the Stillwater situation where we're seeing people starting to post inaccurate information, questioning the state animal health official, that's the point where you want to start thinking about taking things up the food chain. And certainly, from the EDC perspective, we would want to reach out to the state animal health officials and say, this is what's happening. Here's what we're seeing. How do you want to resolve it? How do we want to provide that information? An emergency situation is, it's all gone bad. We need to get ahead of this, and then we need a crisis plan of how do we jump ahead of it. We talked a little bit about those responses already, but it's just important to be thinking about how you develop them. What is your process internally? Whatever your process is, it's going to have to be sped up quite a bit. So think about, in advance, who has the ability to act? Can you give your communications director the ability to post at a moment's notice? Can you trust that person to do that? And say, you have the ability to act. Should something come up, and you need to respond immediately, I'm trusting you to do that. It's a difficult place because typically within state government, federal government, oftentimes our organizations, we run it up the ladder and back down again and then back up again. So we really need to have a conversation around how do we do that? How do we get approvals so that they're faster and a quicker process? One of the most important things, if we were practicing through crisis drills, and Mickey's been at our drills that we do for like the dairy industry, the biggest thing that we want to take away is this first point. It sounds very simple, but when we get in a crisis, we get worked up, we're ready to act, we're running fast, we just want to post things, and just slow down for a second. You've got some time, think it through. Is this what we should do? Ask some questions of yourself. Does this post make sense? Is this going to get us into more trouble than we're already in? Just have some of those questions asked so that you are to the point where you feel confident in what you're doing. So, let's take a look at, in our scenario, we'll jump back into our scenario. You want to flip to the next slide. Let's take a look and see what is happening right now in social media. So we know that we currently do not know if this horse is positive. It has been quarantined to the barn. Our state vet's office has been contacted, but social media is already exploding because of our loose lip trainer, and there's lots of people at the track with smartphones. So if we look a little bit at what's happening, this is actually one of the monitoring systems, a robust monitoring system that we have for social media. So the first post 13 minutes ago says, "There's a barn under quarantine, never a good sign." Then Northeast Vet Clinic replied back, "Busy day at the Lincoln racetrack." That, I should say, it wasn't a reply back, but actually just posted them almost simultaneously. And then somebody says, "What do you mean? It's never good if you're busy at a racetrack." And the Northeast Vet Clinic replied, "We are working with government officials right now. They'll pass along more information." Not a bad response. That, you know, they're not putting information out there that's negative or anything. One of the interesting things is the moment that goes out, we've got people over here saying, "Well, at state gov, what the heck is going on?" So we don't have confirmation of a disease yet. And it's not a required disease, but they're already looking to you guys to tell us what's happening. So that's an important piece to think about. It's this difficult point where you don't know what you really are dealing with. Is it the disease or isn't it the disease? One of my favorites is, we know this will happen. I hate seeing tape up at the track, pray for the horses, and then it always goes back to kids and to people. I see tape around the barns. We're at the racetrack. My kids love horses, but I think we're going to go home early. So people are worried that they're going to get sick. They think it's a public health emergency. We've got folks at the racetrack that are worried about what they're seeing, and they're starting to question it, and it's going viral. It's starting to kind of escalate. So in your groups again, does this change anything? With it, government folks, does this change whether you decide to respond now that you know it's truly going viral?
I think you have to have the facts first before you've got to have the facts, because if you try to jump ahead of it and you do something without being completely sure exactly what's going on, that's going to backfire and be even worse.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, anything? Does it change anything for the EDCC? Does it change anything for our organization? What are you doing? If you're getting calls from your members, they're seeing this, what are you doing? Are you saying anything to your memberships? Don't all talk at once.
Probably just tell them to stay tuned, wait for more information, you get some,
Wait for results.
yeah.
So just a simple response that says, we know about the situation, we're in contact with the state vet's office and others.
EDCC for more information, because then
They're
the
going to post.
information on the website says this is it, you know.
Yep.
This EHP will not harm, it's not.
Yep. That's one thing that we can do. You know, as we go through this process, we can start building that up as the resource. We can simply say, check out this location for more information. If you have questions or if you think you might have a horse with symptoms, if that becomes part of it, contact your local animal health authority or the EDCC. There's just so many different ways that we can start to incorporate it into our messaging that at this point where it gets kind of difficult. So to just further it one more step, we've now got a confirmation. It indeed is EHV at the horse track. It talks about a little bit about what happened, which we know a lot of those things. The barns located on the premises have now been quarantined, along with the farm. So the state vet's office did decide to take some action. And so they quarantined the farm, they quarantined the barn. As a result, numerous horse owners have to stall their animals for an additional time while the disease investigation continues. So at the site, they've asked people to hold their horses. The state is asking for patience as it works to expedite the process. So one piece that it did say is as animals test negative, they will be allowed to leave the site. When a horse is cleared to leave, we are asking horse owners to remain vigilant by watching for signs of the disease or isolating animals once home. So now we've got confirmation. This will be, again, as we constantly have talked about, a great opportunity for us to now look at bringing in our experts, and they can talk about the disease, what it is and what it isn't, how it transfers, how it's all of those different kinds of pieces. It's really important that, as we've talked about through a lot of these different pieces, we're now going to be more likely in full crisis mode. We've been trying to get information out there, be a part of the conversation, but now we're in a situation. Now we have to fully engage as an industry, whether it's an organization, whether it's our state vet's office, our federal folks, whether it's our health experts. We all need to engage and start sharing this information. The EDCC is not going to be able to do this alone when we're into a crisis situation. If you want to get ahead of it and you want to provide the information that's accurate, we need everyone. We need the horse owners to know where to go for information. We need our large vet clinics to understand where they can find information. That's why all of those steps prior to the crisis are so important. Because if we've done that right, just like you guys have built up your following, they know where to go. So that helps to squash that. They see a rumor about something happening at a racetrack, and they're going to think, oh, what is that site? The Equine Disease Communication Center. I bet you they might have something on it. And if they don't, then they can call. So we want to build that first so that people automatically think of that. And until we get to that point, we have to be the ones that send them back there. We want to involve the state animal health folks, we want to involve the federal government, but we also want to make sure that as an industry we've got this option. So again, just to reiterate, we are transparent as much as we can be. There are some things that are obviously confidential, relevant, keeping it to the question when we can, the question that is asked. If somebody asks about public health threat, we're not going to provide them an answer that talks about the symptoms in the animal. They want to know if it's going to impact their kids or themselves. So let's get them to that information. Be timely and accurate. So in other words, as we talked about, be there, be present, be social. Continuously monitoring. I can't even reiterate how important this is, because if you're not watching what the conversation is doing, you don't know what's happening. It might be that it's a very small reaction and it doesn't even need to be responded to. If you're monitoring, you'll understand whether if they're having all of these advocates or folks that are posting things and lots of questions are really having a big impact, or if this is something pretty small. So monitoring will give you that overall picture. It will also let you know if this is a regional thing, or is this something that's happening across the entire country? Are people getting worked up about it? So correcting misinformation is as simple as simply saying, you can find the latest information at the Equine Disease Communication Center. If you're looking for signs, if you want to understand the disease more, check out this fact sheet on the EDCC. If you want this information, go here. It's just simply providing that correction, a little statement of what the fact is, and find more here, and practice. So, just to do one more little piece, just to see how if everybody is comfortable with where we're at. Now we've gotten a phone call. So we've been pushing people to our website for more information. And it's been going on social media. We've been putting out some responses. But there's been a horse owner that called in to the call center. And she simply said that she believes that her horse has EHV because it's showing EHV-like symptoms. The symptoms she's read online, on social media. She's not connected to the racetrack at all, and no tests have been done, and no veterinarians have been contacted. She's just simply called the call center. So as an industry, what would we hope would happen with this? And what would we want to do with this kind of information? Do we automatically just say, oh, nope, this isn't a big deal. She's not connected to the racetrack. No big deal. We just know a few things when they call into the call center. So what do we do with that information? Tom, what do we do with it? Okay. Is that what you would like to hear? Regulatory people?
If it's not, on your affordable list, that would make sense. At least for one.
I don't think it makes any difference whether it is on your reportable list or it isn't. I think the first step is obviously to call a veterinarian and call someone who knows, has some knowledge and expertise in that field. I mean, it may be a rumor that's meaningful, or it may be something that's meaningful and may not be, but
Right.
you don't want to bring the troops out on something like this.
Yep. No, I fully agree with you. Even just being able to direct that person to where they need to go or to get some information. So it could either be state animal health office or even federal, or it could be over the vet's office. But interestingly that, a lot of times this is common. I remember getting calls like this all the time from horse owners, and we're seeing it online that rather than just calling now, they're posting it, this is what's happening. And so this is certainly something we're going to need to think about, is how do we respond to this? Obviously, from the EDCC perspective, they're going to pass this information on to the state animal health official. Would that be accurate, Josie? In most cases, we would send this on at least so that they could, or tell them to contact their veterinarian or that kind of thing.
The latter.
The latter. Okay, so we would recommend that they do exactly what you guys talked about. But this is just one of those pieces where it's a situation we're going to have to deal with without a doubt. We're going to see people thinking that their horses might be sick because they care about them, and they should. So our crisis is over. You can all calm down now. But what I think really we were able to do is at least talk through some of the pieces about how it realistically comes to light. What do we do? And I think the biggest, most important thing is understanding that it's not the task force's job to take this thing to the next level. They're going to keep pushing this project forward, but the responsibility really becomes all of ours as equine enthusiasts, as regulatory folks, as folks from the organizations within the industry. It's something we all really have to push forward. And long story short, once in place, could be incredibly beneficial to not only horse owners and those that are showing them and taking them across the country, but incredibly beneficial to all of us within the industry. I think many times over the course of how much the way we've communicated has changed in state government and federal government, and we now start to think about sharing that information. Josie talked about just the fact that stuff is going on, and they understand, the industry knows that the government is making some decisions, but I think now we're to a point where government is letting people in more, to be part of that conversation and to say, here's what we're doing. We haven't put an announcement out yet, but we're trying to make these decisions. And so working to build those relationships, like you talked about, where you can get to the point where you're sharing that information very openly is really important in a crisis, because even a half-hour notification that something is going on allows you to get your thoughts together before you get a phone call from the media or before you need to start putting information out on Facebook or answering questions from anyone, really. So it really will be worth all the work as it develops. It's a project that I think is just incredibly valuable, and I wish more industries would start to think about that kind of collaboration. So.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I'm sure that you'll probably be around for any questions for a little bit of time, and we want to thank all of the speakers associated in our team. And again, of course, thanks, Juan, for I think this is a very valuable message, and certainly one that I don't know much about, but I think it's obvious that we really need to know something about. And, so with that, we'll take time for a couple of questions, and then we want to have go through the business meeting and the resolution.
Carl, I'll leave some business cards up here. If you have questions about it, or if you want some of those resources I mentioned, just let me know.
Anybody have any questions for Melissa?
I just have a question from a standpoint. You talked earlier about, those holding statements that we have versus having those stock statements. How do you balance those when you're in a situation from a regulatory perspective where you're in a holding pattern, waiting for more information, but you don't want to continue to sound like you're giving that stock statement?
Well, and knowing you, I think one of the biggest things I would do is really, I think if we just put the statement out there without looking at what we're responding to, that's part of our problem. I know that many times we cannot respond to exactly what they're asking, or if we give them the information they want. But really being able to try and personalize it a little bit. Again, the whole social media realm is about being human. It's about being real. And so if you can't give them any more information than you just provided, but speaking directly to their situation, if they've got a quarter horse that's 15 years old and they're concerned because they're going to be, they're concerned because it's been in that area, say, I understand your concern, but we're working to do these things, or that type of thing. The important thing to remember too is that when we're in a crisis, we don't have to respond to everyone either. It's not a situation where you literally need to have somebody posting every time, but if you've got 5 or 6 posts that look pretty similar, make one main post that just says, we've had a lot of questions today about this. I want you guys to know that there's this resource available should you want to learn more. And you can address them in a bulk versus having to address them individually. So, does that help?
Yeah.